I was gonna go out with my friends tonight, but I decided to stay in because I've been out so many nights the past month, and I don't know if my liver is gonna put up with my nonsense much longer. And also, I'm just tired. And I went out, I don't know, 2 nights last week, and it was so much drinking and staying up so late, getting home at like 3 a.m., and then needing all week to recover from the loss of sleep. What I really don't like about, I don't know, is it the Western world or maybe the whole world? I don't know, is that alcohol is so normalized instead of something way more fun like weed or, I don't know, mushrooms or. I don't know, like, why do we have this obsession? I mean, because those are all downers, right? Like, marijuana is a downer just like alcohol. Why don't we do weed instead? Because then there's no hangover. Um, it still impairs your sleep, but at least it doesn't poison your entire body or destroy your liver or give you cancer. You know what I mean? I just don't like that alcohol is so normalized in our society. And I never have. That being said, I love alcohol. As somebody who grew up with severe, crippling social anxiety, alcohol is probably the most helpful tool that I've ever utilized for overcoming it. That being said, once you have overcome it, once you have overcame the social anxiety, you don't need the tool anymore. Does that make sense? And I don't know if everyone else is just walking around with severe crippling social anxiety like I used to do. And that's why they are so obsessed with alcohol. I don't know. I don't know. But then also I think to myself, like maybe it's not about having social anxiety. Maybe it's about having something to blame. Like maybe people want to do things that they want an excuse for. Like they want to be able to say, that was so fun and I was so crazy, but it was because I drank so much, not because I wanted to have fun and be crazy. You know what I mean? I think people are afraid of owning their own desires. Ooh, I think that's true. I think that's true because I think in our society we shame people for the things that they want. And when they get fucked up, they're allowed to actually want the things that they want because it was the alcohol's fault, right? It made me crazy. I think that's true for a lot of people. I think that's sad. Wouldn't it be nice if we lived in a society where we didn't shame other people for like wanting to be a whore? Just be a whore. Just be a whore. This is my TED Talk, and my message is just be a whore. And don't shame other people for being a whore. Just let them be whores and get tested regularly. Yeah, that's great advice, I think. That's what I'm learning as I get older into my old age is just it's okay to be a whore. In fact, you should be a whore, but you should get tested regularly. I'm going to talk about something that is controversial. Maybe, potentially, could be controversial. I don't know. It's something I never hear anyone else talking about. And when nobody else talks about it, it makes you think, oh, maybe this is a very taboo subject if nobody ever talks about it. And maybe people have calculated correctly that talking about it is devastating or something. You know what I mean? Which is why they don't do it. I don't know. But personally, I just don't see what it. I think the worst thing that could happen is people just think I'm full of shit or they don't like me. I don't know. But both of those things are fine. I don't give a shit about that. Anyway, so yeah. I am currently 33 years old, and I guess I sort of started living my life as a gay person when I was 27. So it's been about 6.5 years, almost 7 years. And I guess I rapidly discovered that a lot of people are attracted to me. And then that kind of multiplied when I moved to a different country where I was like a foot taller than everyone and dramatically whiter than everyone. because I live in Mexico at this point, and it seems like before I moved here, I really didn't know anything about Mexican culture, but I'm learning that there's a lot of like colorism and racism, which is a double-edged sword. On one hand, it makes me fetishized frequently because people believe that whiteness is more beautiful than, I don't know, other colors. But also at the same time, there's a lot of hostility towards white people. Well, there's both. There's resentment, hostility, but then there's also like glorification, and obviously different people feel different types of ways, and some people feel both simultaneously. Like you could resent white people, but also at the same time secretly be attracted to them and fetishize them. You know what I mean? And that's usually people are feeling both at the same time, right? It's not usually you either love white people or you hate white people. It's usually both at the same time. It's like, I resent that you get all of this unearned privilege just for existing, but simultaneously I've been brainwashed for my entire life to perceive you as the pinnacle of beauty, and I can't just magically undo that brainwashing. I find you beautiful and I can't help it. You know what I mean? People are usually feeling both at the same time. And what it results in is a lot of objectification, fetishization, people really preoccupied with race in a way that, I guess, living in the US, I never had to face or grapple with, because obviously the vast majority of people in the United States are white. I mean, obviously, I was aware that different races existed and were experiencing different levels of racism and discrimination and all of those sorts of things. But there's a difference between understanding intellectually versus it's actively happening to you in every scenario all the time. Like, do you understand that those are very different things? Like, on one hand, I understand on an academic level that this is happening to other people all the time. But there's a difference between I understand that versus I'm living it every single day inescapably. Does that make sense? And it's a very complicated topic because on one hand, I am not being discriminated against usually. I'm being discriminated for usually. On one level, it is technically discrimination, but it's not negative discrimination. Like we've hardwired this belief into our minds that the word discriminate is a negative thing, when all discriminate means is to differentiate. And differentiation is not inherently a negative thing, but the word has become so associated with talking about negative things that we don't even have language to describe a positive discrimination. You know what I mean? Or and then like calling it a positive is sort of erasing half the experience too, because on one hand, it's objectification, even if it results in benefits. And objectification is inherently dehumanizing, right? Like you're not seeing the individual, you're seeing what color the individual is. And then you're interacting with a color instead of a person. Does that make sense? So like, even though that interaction with the color is resulting in unearned benefit, your humanity is still being erased. You're still being dehumanized. So like calling it positive discrimination is also not correct either. It's a mixed bag, right? Like all forms of objectification and dehumanization are inherently negative. But externally, they can result in unearned benefits. So it's like a really complicated subject. And I've been experiencing that a lot ever since moving to Mexico. Like, I mean, living in the United States, I always felt objectified and dehumanized my entire life, but it's like 10 times worse here in Mexico. And I think, being someone who, this is something I think about a lot, is I feel like throughout my entire life, nobody has ever cared about me as a person. I think from a very early age, I've always been instrumentalized for other people's benefit. Like, starting with my parents, I felt like love in my parents' household was basically praise for making good grades or performing well in sports, but then otherwise, I didn't matter. You know, like my parents never wanted to know me as a human being. They wanted to be proud of my achievements and my accomplishments that made them look like successful parents that they could brag about to their friends and their coworkers and their relatives and all that. But me as a person never mattered. And so like the first 2 decades of my life were even beyond that, actually, even in college, I felt like who I was as a person was completely irrelevant to anyone. And even to myself, I suppressed it because it just was not rewarded, to be a human. It was rewarded to be a source of, I don't know, things my parents could brag about, right? It was never to be, figure out what I like and who I am and what my boundaries are and what I want out of life instead of what my parents want for me out of life. You know what I mean? And I've done a lot of reading about this experience. I think it's typically called emotional neglect when you are sort of instrumentalized by your parents to be a source of bragging rights for them, a source of proof that they did a good job as parents, even though it's the opposite, I guess, according to experts. Experts say emotional neglect is child abuse, funnily enough. So it's actually not proof that you were a good parent. It's actually the opposite. Yeah. Anyway, I had to get up to check my food that's cooking on the stove. Yeah. So I felt sort of irrelevant to my parents as a human being, as a person, and instead was instrumentalized as a source of, things that they could brag about and feel good about themselves about. And then, when I kind of became independent, started, paying for all my own bills, working full time, lived in a completely different city, was doing everything all on my own, etc. I sort of transitioned from being objectified from by my parents to being objectified by all the people I was hanging out with. So I've never really felt like, and I guess I should clarify that further. Like when I moved away from my parents and started being fully independent, that was also at the same time that I started living as a gay person. So basically, all of the places that I would go were places for gay people, like gay bars, gay sports teams, meetup groups, etc. Because I wanted to meet other gay people. Because by that point in my life, I had never really met very many. Like maybe like one or two in college, but that was it. You know what I mean? And so I wanted to meet, gay people. So I moved to a big gay city, where lots of other gay people were. And I wanted to, find peers that I could relate to for once in my life. Turns out we could relate on that level, that we both grew up gay and had the similar shared traumas because of that. But that was it. That was the only thing we really had in common. And finding people you can relate to on a deeper level than that is actually extremely hard. At least for me. I don't know if it's extremely hard for everybody else, but it's extremely hard for me. And for my whole life, I've always had this perception of an outsider looking in, that it was really easy for everyone else to find people they could relate to. And it always kind of felt very isolating that I could never find anyone I could relate to. And even when I was, going to gay bars and interacting with hundreds, even thousands of gay people my age, still I didn't relate to them beyond we're similar in age and we're both gay. Other than that, we don't really have anything in common. You know what I mean? But what my point is, I'm getting sidetracked, is I felt very objectified in those environments too, as you can imagine, right? Like, especially gay male environments. I have no idea what it's like for gay women, but for gay men, everything is about looks. And it feels like there's this unspoken social hierarchy that gets formed when you're in a group of gay men And that social hierarchy is basically a direct one-to-one correlation with how much everybody wants to fuck you, right? Which is why I think we see, like, as men get older, I think male sexual desirability, or like what men are attracted to, whether they're gay or straight or whatever, is often correlated with age. Like when you're in your 20s and 30s, you're at like peak desirability. And sexual desirability, I'm talking purely objectifyingly here, like sexual desirability is strongly correlated with being like in your 20s and 30s. And I think that's why we see for gay men, especially as gay men get older, I think they get increasingly lonelier because living as a gay man, being surrounded by other gay men, is an incredibly dehumanizing experience. Even if you're superficially having a ton of fun, going to a ton of events, meeting a ton of people, etc., it's inherently very dehumanizing and very lonely. You can be in a room with hundreds of other people and feel like nobody sees who you are as a human being, and nor do they give a shit about who you are as a human being either, because it feels like all anyone cares about is whether they want to fuck you or not. That's exactly what it feels like. So, yeah, so that's what I mean when I say I feel like I've been dehumanized and objectified my entire life. And I feel like, I don't know, I've often wished I could be a lesbian because it just seems like women don't have this problem around other women. They have, like, most women have this problem because most women are heterosexual and are trying to date men, and men are dehumanizing them and objectifying them. So really the issue is with men, obviously. But obviously this is not an issue that men are socialized into. Like, when I was growing up, nobody ever told me, be sure to dehumanize and objectify other people. But it's just a natural consequence of male sexuality that we have no control over. Is like, we are strongly visually wired and visually driven. And, I guess the only way to not be like that would be to be blind, but I guess probably even blind men are like, I don't know, auditory driven and scent driven. You know what I mean? It probably just migrates to the other senses. I think men are just hardwired to be, focused on the objective instead of the subjective. And when you only ever just surround yourself with men, I think that's an inherently isolating and lonely experience. And I think now that I'm, in my 30s, I'm realizing I really need more women in my life, because I think for women, it's the opposite experience. They care so much more about the subjective, and the objective is not their main focus and is not as important to them. And that's exactly what I need in my life. I wish I could find it from other gay men, because that would be a lot more enjoyable, because that's who I would like to be in a relationship with, I actually am curious, like, the gay men who are in a relationship, do you feel like your partner cares about who you are on a subjective level? Because I feel like even the one relationship that I was in, he did not give a shit about me on a subjective level. You know what I mean? 'Cause he was a narcissist. You know what I mean? And I think I was naturally drawn to somebody who objectified me that way because my parents did, and it felt familiar, and everyone throughout my whole life did, and it felt familiar, and I didn't even know that I was allowed to want to have someone who gave a shit about me as a human being. I don't think I've ever met anyone who gave a shit about me as a human being. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like even when I date people now, like living in Mexico City, you know, feels like everybody just wants to see my nudes immediately. And like, even if I go on a date, you know, they immediately want to escalate to a hookup. Like you know, it feels almost like a date is like a formality, like a handshake. You know what I mean? Where they're just trying to like see in person, do I still want to fuck you? Yep. Okay. Well, this date can end now. We can go fuck now. You know what I mean? That's what it feels like. It feels like, you know, getting to know someone is a chore and really just going through the motions so you can just, you know, get on to fucking. That's really what it feels like. I mean, it doesn't just feel that way. That's exactly what it is. This is something that has been weighing on my chest probably my entire life, but most especially recently as, you know, somebody who moved from a big gay city to one that is literally 10 times bigger, Mexico City. And the problem did not go away. It just became 10 times worse. Or not worse. It's the same problem. It's just 10 times more frequent. Yeah, that's what it is. Like, instead of being objectified by one guy, it's like 10 guys at the same time, basically. I've always kind of felt like an alien among gay men because I feel like I'm not a sexually driven person, and I never have been. That being said, I like sex, obviously. I'm not asexual, but especially when I was younger, I thought that I was because I cared so much more about people as people, including hot men as people. You know what I mean? And I wanted someone who shared my values and someone I had things in common with and someone I related to and enjoyed talking to. And we had a similar sense of humor and things like that. And like, everybody always thought I was asexual, including myself, because I just didn't want to meet a random stranger and fuck in the bathroom or something. You know what I mean? And so they thought I was asexual. Or I didn't want to go on Grindr and like invite a random stranger I've never met over to my house so we can fuck and then never talk again. And that it's so crazy. It's like our clown world is so backwards and fucked up that if you're not into shit like that, you must be asexual. Okay, that's where I'm gonna end it. Okay, bye.